Joined here by Dave Krieger, who lost his job as the editorial page editor at the Boulder Camera following an editorial that he self-published critical of ownership. You're talking about some of the cutbacks that have happened there at that paper and other smaller papers that are under the same umbrella of ownership. Let me ask you a question that non-journalists have asked me. If you criticize your boss publicly, you're going to get fired, right? Lots of people in lots of jobs will get fired for that. Why is journalism different?
Well, journalism is different because we're the storyteller in the community. So if there's another institution that's 128 years old, is on the verge of being destroyed, we would cover that story. And that's how people in Boulder would find out about it. When it's happening to the newspaper, if the newspaper doesn't tell that story, nobody's going to find out about it. And we have a certain responsibility. We're the only private industry that's named in the Bill of Rights. We have a role in the functioning of our democratic infrastructure, and our role is to let people know what's going on so that they can make decisions about what to do about it. So if the newspaper refuses because its owners bar it from telling this story, how are people in Boulder supposed to do anything about it? If they wanted to save this newspaper, it would be dead before they even knew. So I understand that argument. I get it, and that's why I was prepared to take the consequences. I've been fired. I'm not suing anybody. You know, they had the right to do that. But I had the right under the First Amendment to say what I had to say and to try to get the story out.
Same owner as the Denver Post. We have seen the staff there in what's being called an open rebellion against ownership. Some people may not know, they have union protections that allow a lot of their journalists to speak out against the ownership. Not much is being said about the Camera and other smaller papers all around Colorado owned by this same group.
That's very true. I mean, we are a non-union shop. All of Prairie Mountain Media, which is Longmont and Loveland and Sterling and Fort Morgan, all non-union shops. And more importantly, in terms of the current situation, why the Post was able to publish what they published and we were not, is the Post doesn't have a publisher right now. And so there is no goalie on the business side saying we refuse. So when the COO of Digital First Media, which is the controlling arm of Alden Global Capital for all these newspapers, when he comes down to deliver a rule or a edict like, we don't want anything about this in your newspaper, the person he tells that to is the guy running the business side, and that's the publisher. In the Post, there was no such person, and so they were able to produce that entire section with no oversight. We have a publisher at Prairie Mountain Media, and he is the person who killed my editorial.
You have had a decades-long, very successful career in journalism here in Colorado. More and more newsrooms are populated by very young staffers just starting out in their careers. Would a 30-year-old Dave Krieger have taken the chance that you took?
Good question. I don't know. I moved around a lot when I was that age, so probably. We had an insurrection of a sort at the Burlington Free Press in the 1970s, which was a Gannett paper. And at that time, Gannett and companies like it that were consolidating newspapers all around the country, they were the worst thing that could happen to you because they were cutting in order to increase their profitability. But they were a newspaper company. They were built around a newspaper 95 years ago, and they still, having split off the newspapers now, they're still a newspaper company. So their interest was in the newspaper surviving. They wanted it to be very profitable. They wanted the cost to be very much in control, but they were a newspaper company. Private equity is a different deal. Private equity invests in distressed businesses with the understanding that those businesses are going away. And what they're trying to do is harvest as much cash from them as possible. And when that's a widget business, nobody really cares much about it because something else will take its place. That's creative destruction in capitalism. When it's journalism, when it's all these local First Amendment institutions serving Longmont, serving Boulder, serving Denver, serving all the communities of the Front Range here, you know, what happens? Who replaces them? Who covers city council? Who covers cops and courts and the University of Colorado? It's a different kind of question.
And we've talked about the scary reality on this program, which is that these institutions cover themselves. I mean, essentially through press releases that tell the story they want to tell. Full disclosure for the folks who are watching this on YouTube or Facebook, Dave mentioned Gannett. They used to own 9 News. That company then split, so we're owned now by a company that is affiliated with the old Gannett newspaper company. So what were you hoping to accomplish, and did you inadvertently accomplish it through all of the attention that's been paid to your firing?
Well, yeah, that's what I was hoping to accomplish, so it wasn't really inadvertent. I didn't know that the firing would be the outcome, and I didn't know that for certain. I knew there would be some kind of consequence. And so you end up in this position where people like to read about people losing their jobs. It's one of those things that gets clicks. So once that happens, if the whole point of the exercise was to get the story out, then it's important to take advantage of that fact that people are interested in that and use that event to get the story out. And it's just been amazing to me how many really knowledgeable people in Boulder, people you could ask about almost anything else with regard to civic issues in Boulder, how many of them had no idea that this was going on. And every time we got one more story out, somebody else prominent would reach out to me and say, holy moly, I had no clue this was going on. And so it's very important to me that we continue to tell this story so that Boulder, like Denver, has the opportunity to make a decision. Do we want to save this institution? If so, how do we go about doing that? Or do we not care? Is it so far beyond the pale at this point that we'd be better off starting something else? As long as people know the facts on the ground, they can make that call. If they have no idea, then the paper disappears one day and everybody goes, how'd that happen? Why'd that happen?
Sure. That idea of good information so people can make informed decisions is what we endeavor to do every day. Do you think that the animosity between Alden Global Capital and its workers at the newspaper is so nasty now that they would turn down a good offer to sell? If a bunch of white knight investors in Denver want to buy the Post, or somebody wants to buy the Boulder Daily Camera, would they keep it out of spite?
Well, it's a great question, and the short answer is we don't know. There are certain properties they have sold. They sold Salt Lake to the Huntsman family in Salt Lake, and that would be sort of the ideal situation, a local owner who cares. They sold the Berkshire Eagle, which used to be known as one of the great small papers in America and was stripped down when they were owned by Alden. They sold it back to some local investors, so it can happen. There are complications here that make it more difficult. If somebody in Boulder wants to buy the Boulder Camera, they probably have to buy all of Prairie Mountain Media, which includes Longmont and Loveland and Sterling and Fort Morgan and all those other nameplates. And so the cost is greater, and then if you don't want those other nameplates, you have to try to find local owners in those towns to spin those off to. That's more complex. In Denver, you have pension liabilities attached to the Denver Post, which you wouldn't have with a new entity, which is why there's one theory that Phil Anschutz would rather start up the Rocky Mountain News again, the name of which he now owns, rather than take on those liabilities. So those are business factors. We don't know about Alden Global Capital's internal thinking because they refuse to talk ever about anything. It's unlike any other business you've ever seen. I mean, Bill Cosby has to come out and say something when he's under attack. Everybody, almost everybody, feels that when their integrity is being questioned, they need to get on the public record and make a defense. Alden has not done that. And so does Heath Freeman, the CEO there, does he care? Does he care that he is being portrayed all across the country as, sort of a greedy, spoiled brat who doesn't care about journalism and just wants money to expand his mansion in the Hamptons? I don't know. I don't know. Does this make him angry? The only clue we have is that Guy Gilmore, who's now running their digital first media front, their journalism front, has come down and told publishers, because this was leaked in Kingston, New York, as you know, I don't want our company mentioned in your paper at all. I want you to scour every story about the newspaper industry and make sure we are not in there. So it's bothering them, but not so much that they would actually come out and make a defense, not so much that they would actually state their case, which they have yet to do.
Yeah, and we don't know if it bothers them from the reputational aspect or simply from the dollars and cents aspect, that they think it's bad for business if people know how they're conducting their business. Last question. You've been working in this town for decades in journalism. Is your career in journalism over?
I do not know the answer to that. I don't know what comes next, I wrote in the blog that when you do something like this, when you come out publicly and talk about an employer, certain employers are going to say, I'm not hiring that guy because he might do that to us. So what I tried to explain was someone who would blow the whistle on a bad situation can still be a loyal employee in a good situation. And, I was at the Rocky Mountain News for 27 years. That worked out pretty well, I think, for both parties, because that was a great situation. And I'm confident that there are good situations out there. Whether I will be a fit for any of them, I guess, remains to be seen.
All right. Dave Krieger, we'll leave it there. Thanks for your time.
My pleasure, Kyle. Thank you.